between. So welcome. I planned this seminar mostly to look at some of the problems of the COVID-19 restrictions and what that has suggested to people in terms of a way forward in the new year. So I'm kind of looking at the 2020 to 2021 year and what is going to be most important for teachers and students in that year. So that's kind of the direction I'm heading in, with a bit of background and rationale for why we need to do what we need to do, and some resources for how we're going to do what we need to do. So the first, hopefully you can all see my slides there. This just gives you my website, my own personal website. There are lots of resources there under the ATL tab. Obviously ATL means approaches to learning for anyone in an IB school, but I imagine many of you are not in IB schools. So I will use the, excuse me, I will use the letters ATL to talk about this program I'm engaged with, but you could also call it 21st century skills. So if you're in a non-IB school, you would call it a 21st century skills program. If you're in an IB school, you would call it an ATL program. Same program, different names. So all the resources that are on my website under the ATL tab are just as suitable for schools that are not IB schools as it is for IB schools. My clicker is not working. So that is my email address there, lance@taolearn.com. So you're welcome to send me any questions during or after the seminar. That is my Twitter name on the right-hand side. You're welcome, if you're a fan of Twitter, you're welcome to tweet as we go. And that is my Facebook page, the one where I post things that are not necessarily directly IB related. As you're probably aware, I live in New Zealand, up here at the top of the world. And up until the coronavirus problem, I spent my whole life traveling around the world. I've been doing that for 20 years. I have worked in 37 countries. Approximately 250,000 students have been through my programs, and I really enjoyed traveling. And so being at home for the last 6 months has been quite an unusual thing for me, but I'm quite enjoying being at home now, and I'm looking forward to doing a lot more seminars like this. So this is kind of like, we could call this ATL number 1. I think there will be about 10 ATL seminars that develop, that I want to produce, showing people how to install an ATL program in their school, even if they have to do it remotely. So this is my whole theme now. And I'm quite enjoying being home. I've rebuilt my entire office. Everything has been redone so that I can produce videos here in my home. So I guess this is the big question. What did the COVID-19 lockdown show us? Now, I've talked to teachers and I've talked to parents and I've talked to some students, and it seems quite clear that when the whole lockdown thing happened, I don't know how quickly it happened in your country, but in my country it happened very, very fast. And so suddenly all teachers had to produce lessons for students to do at home. And of course, the thing that popped up straight away was that most teachers suddenly realized that they were poorly prepared to enable students to learn their subject matter remotely. I mean, because of course remote learning was something that was a novelty before Corona. It was something that everyone liked to do, and everyone was doing somewhat, but then suddenly having to make all your lessons able to be accessed remotely was a big challenge for many teachers. And it seems to me that many, many teachers were not familiar with the best websites for delivery of their own subjects. And I think this points to a real need for schools to get on board with buying subscriptions to the paid sites and getting access to all the free sites and making that access widely available to all teachers, so that teachers can get very familiar with the best sites for their subject. Also, most teachers were untrained in how to design good, engaging remote learning lessons, because it's a very special craft, it's a very special art. And I was involved in that like 20 years ago, but I certainly haven't done much of that myself in recent years. So I think we're all learning how to create lessons that actually capture students' attention and hold that attention to get them to do the work that they need to do. And luckily, the people involved in all this, of course, all of you, are all teachers. And so you're adaptable, you know how to change, and teachers did adapt and change very, very quickly. And so everyone started accessing all the good resources and everyone started designing remote learning lessons. And then they discovered the other part of the problem, which is, of course, that students are not very good at managing their own remote learning. Most students found it difficult to focus, to concentrate, and to put in anywhere near the amount of time that they normally would have put in if they had been at school. And to me, that some of that comes down to the actual skills of effective self-management. And these are the skills that were less important, I guess, before coronavirus, but now they become the most important skills for students all over the world, is the skills of managing your own learning. And I'll go through all those, but obviously there's time management, there's task management, there's motivation skills, there's learning to persist and persevere, but there's also learning to research well, learning to sort out information and find the good information, learning to write well, learning to present well in a remote context. These are all skills that I think students need to practice more in the future. Also, of course, students often had not had to practice remote self-managed learning. And so because they hadn't practiced it, it was not a natural skill for them. They had to learn how to manage their own learning. And a lot of that ended up, of course, with parents. It's interesting talking to parents because I'm sure many, many of you are parents and you've been at home, I imagine, teaching your own children in the last few months. And it's always interesting to ask how many people discovered that it's really, really difficult to teach your own children. It's much easier to teach a class of children than it is to teach your own children. And how many people just suddenly felt so grateful for teachers in schools who were managing teaching their own children. So yes, it's a real serious challenge for parents. And I guess from a school's point of view, the self-management of learning up until the pandemic had not been made a very high priority. And I think let's say post-September, hopefully things are almost back to normal then, I think helping make self-management a high priority in schools will be a very important thing for all schools to take on board. And it's not just because of coronavirus, and it's not just because we might get through this pandemic and there might be another pandemic. It's also because managing your own learning has been identified by so many people as being the critical skill for the 21st century, even when things get back to normal. And I want to show you something about that. And to me, it all comes back to ATL skills or 21st century skills. So I'd like to start with purpose. What is the purpose of a 21st century skills or ATL skills program? To me, there's only one purpose, which is really to develop self-managed learners. That's the overall purpose of the entire program, is to help children learn all the skills they need to manage their own learning. And so I think we need to teach children a full curriculum of ATL or 21st century skills. We need to have them apply those skills in every subject. And we need to make the successful self-management of learning an objective of summative assessment. In other words, when we are assessing children, we need to include their success in managing their own learning as one of the criterion of assessment. And I think this is a significant change. We need to have lots and lots of opportunities for students to practice self-management, and we need to have standards of self-management to aim for students to aim for, and for students to be assessed against. So these, I think, are vital things for the future, but I'm also going to show you some ways that we can actually get all of this happening right now, even in a remote learning situation. And what we're doing with all this is we're trying to help students realize that they actually do have control over their own learning. You know, some students feel they're helpless. They do not have any control. And I guess in a school environment, there are many, many things that are out of their control. If you think about when they are back at school, what do they have control over? You know, there's not very many things they have control over, are they? I mean, do they control who they're taught by, or what they're taught, or where they're taught, or when they're taught, or how they're taught, or who sets the tests, or who marks the tests? Of course not. Students have no control over any of those things. And so for some students, that puts them in a situation where they start to feel helpless. And feeling helpless is the worst thing if you're trying to learn. So I think the way I talk to students about ATL skills or 21st century skills is I try and show them that there are two things that every student has control over. And the first is how much effort they put in. That's obvious, isn't it? How much effort they put in. That's totally in a student's control. But then the second thing, which is equally important, is how they apply that effort. In other words, what strategies do they use? What strategies do they use for things like time management, listening and concentration, note-making and summarizing, reading for understanding, remembering well, setting and achieving goals, dealing with pressure and stress, and doing what I call failing well. These are just some of the skills that need to be contained in any 21st century or ATL skills program. And what we're doing is we're showing students that by learning good strategies and practicing specific skills, they can actually take more control over the success of their own learning. So to me, to sum this up, any skills program in thinking and learning skills, ATL skills, 21st century skills, whatever you call it, any program like that is all about focusing students on factors to improve their own success that are in their control. And if you think about it, if a student had a really good repertoire and really good competence in all the skills they need to learn well, then they would not only succeed at school, they would also succeed at university, and they would also succeed in any career, any job, anywhere in the future. And of course, every country has been looking for years at what are these skills and what are the most important skills for the future. But it's almost been an academic exercise up until coronavirus problem. And now everyone's trying to work out, well, what are the skills? What are the most important skills that we need to teach our students? And there are lots of papers here. You'll get these slides later on. So there are lots of papers here that you can read if you're interested. Every country seems to be looking at this. And why? Because of employment trends. Because it is said that students in high school today will have many, many jobs by the time they finish their work. By the time they get it to as old as me, they would have had 10 times as many jobs as I've had. They would be probably working in many, many jobs that haven't even been invented yet. I have a good example of this in my family, where my daughter, who graduated with a master's degree in English literature and media studies, actually ended up in a job as a social media marketing manager for a shared equity app development company. Now, if you think about that, that's a job that can only exist now. It could not have existed 10 years ago. That's a kind of job that we're talking about in terms of jobs in the future. There are many, many occupations, careers and jobs now that could not have been in place 5, 10 years ago. And it would have been very difficult to predict jobs like social media marketing manager, wouldn't it? And so how can we predict what jobs children will take in 10 years' time when we don't even know what the future will hold? On the other side of the equation, of course, unemployment in youth, 15 to 24-year-olds, is at an all-time high. And now, with the results of the pandemic affecting economies all around the world, this will be more and more significant. And it is said, certainly this data is about a year old, that at that point, over 60% of all workers lacked any kind of permanent employment contract. In other words, most workers were changing jobs frequently. They had to adapt, they had to change, they had to be able to take on new skills. They needed to learn how to take on new skills. That, it seems to me, has become the most important skill of all. So here's a world picture of the percentage of workers without a permanent employment contract. Just relating to that last point, the darker the red colour, the more people do not have permanent work. And once upon a time, a permanent job, a job for life, was something that many people thought they would have, and those opportunities have now gone in most countries. This is a graph of the changing nature of work between 1983 and 2014. This is from the United States, but I think it's relevant to most parts of the world, where routine cognitive work, routine manual work, and non-routine manual work are all trending down, and the only one that's really trending up is non-routine cognitive work. And it's an interesting thing when you think about, especially manual work. You know, many parts of the world, there is still a lot of manual work, but the rising sophistication of robots has put paid to many, many jobs. And I've got a little video clip here that I hope will work to show you what you may not be aware of in terms of the advance of robot labor. Have a look at this. This is really kind of creepy. Look at that. That's something out of science fiction. Sometimes he doesn't get the right there. Here we have a whole team of those little robots in a truck. If you're interested in seeing more of this, it's go to YouTube and look at Boston Dynamics. It's an interesting thing, but basically it's saying that the robots are so sophisticated now that we can imagine most manual laboring jobs disappearing in the next, or how long, 10 years? And of course, the amount of jobs that are going to be replaced by machinery varies country by country. If you look at this little graphic, China, it looks like 77% risk of jobs being replaced by automation. Thailand, 72%, Ethiopia, 85%, South Africa, 67%, Nigeria, 65%. So many countries are looking at huge changes in the job tasks, and which relates directly to the skills needed by employees to be able to manage new tasks if they are no longer engaged with manual labor. And if we look at the digital world, I have a few slides here that I'll go through quite quickly, which just reminding you of the world that we are now in terms of the billions of people using the internet and the billions of people using social media. The growth rates are interesting. Growth rates in total population are only 1.1%, but growth rates in internet use is 9% and mobile social media is 10%. The daily time spent using the internet has been on a rise for many years. Mobile share of total internet time is obviously rising and rising. The amount of mobile data that's being consumed across the world just carries on increasing. It's almost in an exponential growth now. Social media, 42% of the world's population are active mobile social media users. Isn't that incredible? 42%. Social media users over time is obviously increasing. Time spent using social media is obviously increasing. Mobile social media users is obviously increasing. This is probably one of the most interesting slides, showing monthly active users, user accounts, or unique visitors to each platform in millions. And this was at January last year. Facebook had 2.27 billion people. It's astonishing numbers of people who are able to connect to each other through one platform. And it raises serious concerns about the power of social media, which I don't know if you're familiar with Cambridge Analytica, the company that was involved in the Brexit vote and Donald Trump's election, where they only influenced each vote in one direction. They were only hired by one side of each of those votes, and the side that actually hired that company to influence people through Facebook, WhatsApp, WeChat, through all the platforms they could find. Well, it wouldn't have been WeChat, so Facebook and YouTube and the other platforms that are available in the Twitter as well in the United States and Britain, had a serious impact on that vote. But anyway, moving on, the trends that people have identified by 2030 in the developed world are things like automation. Obviously, cars, buses, trains, aircraft, food delivery, doctors' visits, banking, many services that involve people at present will be taken over by automation. Manual work will obviously disappear. Artificial intelligence will be involved in all aspects of life. I mean, it's already there now. I don't know if you have the Netflix service on your television or your computer where you are, but Netflix was one of the first companies to use a predictive algorithm to work out what people wanted and then give them what they wanted. And I believe that the show called House of Cards, the American version of that, was the very first TV series that was produced based on the predictions of an artificial intelligence predictive algorithm. And it's taken off ever since, of course. Most work will be contracted, it is said, and most workers will be freelance. In other words, most people will take advantage of working remotely, working at home, and be involved in digital teams. I'm involved in a couple of teams myself from home here, and working on specific projects. And so probably long-term employment in one job is something that maybe a lot of people won't have in the future. And the thing about selectivity for those kinds of jobs, getting involved in a digital collaborative team, will be driven by social media, because it is the social media presence that will actually be what employers use to pick the right people for the right jobs. And so social media identity becomes as important as real life identity. And this is very important, because young people, I don't think they realize this. This is why some of the skills exercises I've been writing recently have been about social media identity and security, because young people still treat social media very much as a game. And they don't realize that everything they ever post is there forever and anyone can find it. And if a service is free, then you are the product. This is a very interesting notion, because all our data is being used and is being sold. You know, Facebook is not a social media company, it is an advertising company. It makes its revenue out of advertising, and we give it the right to do that with our data. So data security is a very important skill for young people today. It is predicted that university courses, 3 to 4 year courses, will be condensed down to short, focused, employment-related courses. And this is probably the most important thing. The primacy of acquired knowledge will be superseded by the skills needed to find information, learn, adapt, create, and problem solve. These are the ATL skills, and these are the 21st century skills that we need to make sure all students are very proficient in by the time they finish in our school. Here's something in the United States showing the change in hours worked predicted by 2030. And if you just look at the bottom there, technological skills, the change will be a 60% change increase in hours worked by 2030 in the United States, and a 52% change in hours worked by 2030. Social and emotional skills are in there as well. It's the skills that people need. There's a good summary here by Andreas Schleicher of PISA OECD, and the PISA ranking of education systems around the world. He said the world economy no longer rewards people just for what they know. The world economy rewards people for what they can do with what they know. It is the doing that counts. Now, most countries have acknowledged this already and are building in capabilities, competencies, and skills into their national curriculum. I won't bore you with too many of these, but Australia has them in their curriculum. Finland has them, transversal competencies, in their curriculum. Ireland has them as key skills. Japan has them as all sorts of skills, including how to learn. Mexico has them as key skills. New Zealand even has them as key competencies. Wales has them in their new curriculum. Canada has them, I quite like this one, creativity, critical thinking, collaboration, communication, character, culture, and ethical citizenship, computer and digital technology. The USA has them in their Common Core State Standards as thinking skills. Argentina has them, Kazakhstan has them, Hong Kong has them, India has them, Singapore, the 21st century competencies, a big framework there. Vietnam has them. I'm doing quite a bit of work with Vietnam schools on these 21st century competencies. China has them in their new curriculum. And of course, big organizations like the Council of Europe has a framework of skills. The European Commission has them. UNESCO has them. The World Economic Forum has them. OECD, this is the last one. OECD has a very complex framework of skills. And so it's interesting to see the changes. And I think all these changes in terms of curriculum, national curriculum, will be accelerated hugely over the next probably few months, simply because of the coronavirus and COVID problem. Of course, in IB schools, where I think the IB schools are probably leading the way in terms of skills for students. In an IB context, of course, you have the learner profile, which if you put all those characteristics together, they make the characteristics of self-managed learners, which you pull out the skills and you've got the ATL skills, which at the PYP, MYP and DP level are broken up into these 5 categories. At the MYP level, those categories are then further broken down into 10 clusters. This is what I designed back in 2012 and elaborated those further into 134 individual skill strands. Now, if you're interested in this structure and you don't have a copy of this, you're welcome to get it from my website. Let me show you what. Here is just a slide showing the new PYP ATL, the MYP ATL, and the DP ATL, and how they all connected. On my website, I have frameworks of MYP and DP ATL skills that you're welcome to go and access and download for yourself. At the website there is www.taolearn.com. When you access them, they look a little bit like this. This is not a very good picture of one of the framework is so big it's hard to describe in one slide. But there are mechanisms built in to enable you to start planning and organizing how you're going to introduce these skills are built into the frameworks. And the workshops that I hope to lead online from now on will take you through a step-by-step process of how to select out the ATL skills or 21st century skills that you need and how to build a program in your own school. So that's the MYP framework. This is the DP framework. The mechanisms are all there. You're welcome to access those. If we go back to countries' performance, PISA has been, since the year 2000, PISA has been the assessment that people are using to look at the quality of their own education system. I mean, it only assessed competency in science, reading, and mathematics, but people are using this to judge the quality of their education system. And if you look at the top 12 countries in PISA in 2015, 8 of those 12 were in Asia. Now, Asia is definitely leading the way, but the one people, interestingly enough, usually focus on is Finland. People say, Finland, that's the place that's really doing it well. Now, it's interesting to ask why and how is Finland doing this so well. I'll show you a couple of very short clips on Finland. Oh, before I do, I'll just show you this. A summary of the PISA results was this quote here. Students who use appropriate strategies to understand and remember what they read perform at least 73 points higher, blah, 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 2 full school years ahead of students who use these strategies the least. Now think about that for a minute. Because what it's saying is that there's only 2 strategies they're talking about. The strategies to understand and remember what they read. In other words, a strategy involving pulling out key points out of written material, textbook material, making summaries of those key points, turning those key points back into sentences that they create themselves, and using some system of remembering in order to remember the key information. Just by using those 2 skills, understanding and remembering skills, that puts a child 2 full school years ahead of a child who doesn't do that. Now that to me is the essence of an ATL or 21st century skills program. Start with the simple stuff that's going to make a huge difference. So here is a little clip from Finland that explains, I think, a very key point.
If you look at the 15-year-olds or 16-year-old Finns who are leaving this basic school, most of them have been in special education throughout their schooling, which means that special education actually is nothing special. So you are a special child or student if you haven't been, if you haven't ever used special services.
Oops, sorry. And
we are putting a lot of emphasis on the early detection of any difficulties and problems that the students in our schools may have. And this is a very different policy to many other countries where these measures are designed in a way that they are implemented only when the problems have emerged and are too visible. But we don't think like this in Finland. I think we believe in this early intervention to make sure that those who are likely to be in trouble will be recognized early and provided help and support as quickly as possible.
So when you think about it, what is the essence of the Finnish experience that's working so well? It seems to be recognizing skills deficiencies in students and doing something about those skills deficiencies, putting in place a skills program. And if you notice the age of those students, they were primary school students who were getting training in all the specific skills they needed for success at school. So I guess I've just been thinking about what are the key priorities for student learning for the 2020 to 2021 school year. It seems to me that we have to start teaching students the strategies and skills of remote self-managed learning. And what are the key skills of learning remotely? Well, it obviously starts with time and task management. Once a person is really well organized, times and tasks, then they've got to develop self-motivation, persistence. They've got to overcome procrastination. They've got to learn from failure when things don't work. They've got to learn how to create and maintain digital collaborations. You know, children are connected 24/7, it seems to me, on their phone with their friends, even though if they're in lockdown and remote. But do they use that connection to actually set up a learning collaborative? Probably not. So learning how to do that, which involves also the things about data security and social media identity. Learning how to effectively search and research, how to validate and verify sources, how to interpret data. Critical media consumption, you know, being able to recognize perspective and bias, understanding IP rights and copyright, how to summarize key points from text and video presentations, speed reading and skim reading, building evidence-based arguments, critical and creative thinking, writing essays, reports, scientific and business reports, creating digital presentations. These are all skills that children need to be taught explicitly, it seems to me. And then they need lots and lots of opportunities to practice self-managed learning. And they need to be able to research, produce, and to be assessed for process and content. What I mean by this is that a teacher's role can't be just assessing content. It has to be also assessing a child's ability to self-manage, because that is, to me, the most critical thing. In class, at home, and in online collaborations. The assessment, the formative assessment, needs to include some commentary on the student's self-managed learning ability. So how do we teach ATL skills? Well, there's two predominant methods, which are explicit teaching, which is specifically teaching the ATL skills themselves, either within or outside of subject-based lessons. Now, I know in IB schools, they don't like, generally from a theoretical point of view, they don't like the idea of taking ATL skills out of context and teaching them as a specific skill. But I think there's actually a lot of merit in that. If children start by learning the skill using very simple content, but then the skill is transferred into their subjects, where they're then using that same skill with more sophisticated subject-based content, that to me achieves much better skill proficiency and subject learning proficiency than trying to do both tasks at once by embedding the skills in the subject, where a child is coming across the subject and the skill at the same time. So this is my point of view. And implicit teaching, where this is where we're teaching ATL skills by using them with subject content in normal subject lessons. So I think both these things can go together quite easily, but I'm a big fan of teaching skills, at least the most basic skills, explicitly first. Ali, I need to ask a question. What time are we going to?
We still have a 20-minute length.
Okay, good, thank you.
And I have a bank of questions for you.
Okay, would you like me to pause and answer some questions?
Yeah, like you just mentioned the idea about assessment lens. And so I had a question on how do we assess those skills online? So maybe if you can elaborate on that.
Sure. I will do an entire session just on assessment sometime in the future. But the difficulty with assessing ATL skills is that it's impossible to assess any ATL skill without that skill working on some subject matter. So, if you're trying to assess a research skill, but the only way you can assess a research skill is by looking at the child's research in a particular subject. And what tends to happen is that the focus tends to be on the subject rather than on the skills. So most ATL skills are very, very difficult to assess the skill. But in fact, you don't actually need to assess the skill. What you need to assess is the result of the action of the skill, which is on them finding the right material, summarizing it, recognizing the bias, the perspective, whatever, and incorporating that in the essay that they're writing. You still end up assessing the essay, but you're assessing the essay from the point of view of the process the child went through to achieve that essay result. You see, the thing about ATL skills is that when a child is proficient in ATL skills, their normal subject grades will improve because they're learning how to process information better. So I'm not a big fan of anyone trying to give a grade or a score or a mark to an ATL skill proficiency. The results will be seen in improving subject results. But I am a big fan of having standards for skills, like what can a master of this subject be able to do? Of this skill. What is someone who is a very, very good researcher? What is the particular standard that they can reach? And then having children self-assess against that standard. I'm a big fan of self-assessment, and I built it into all the work that I've done. And I've seen that self-assessment seems to be the best way to for a child to improve their confidence in their own skills proficiency.
Good. So I think, Lance, you gave us a clear picture about your opinion on assessment and the assessment of the skill. I'm going to ask you just a quick question and then you will continue. You shared with us on the screen the MYP framework. So we have many PYP teachers. They are asking, do we have something similar for PYP?
Okay. The PYP people at the IB have created a framework of PYP skills. The thing about PYP ATL skills are much more invested in the teacher than in the student. What I mean by that is it is possible to get an MYP student to actually practice a specific ATL skill independently, remotely, by themselves. So we can create exercises for MYP students to do, for DP students to do, but for PYP students, it's much more to do with the pedagogy, to do with the way in which the teacher teaches. I've actually got a couple of clips here of PYP ATL use, because it's much more to do with the teacher deciding what to focus on in a particular class or what cluster of skills to focus on, rather than specifically getting a student to practice a certain skill by themselves, so to speak. So what I'm planning on doing, I have this new website which I mentioned, but what we're planning on doing is actually creating a portal for teachers to help teachers plan lessons using ATL skills at the PYP level. Whereas at the MYP and DP level, those skills can actually be taught and learned more independently. So it's much more about teachers learning than it is.
Okay,
so much
thank you. Thank you, Lance, again for this clarification. And let's continue with your slides and inspiring session.
This is a short clip from the International School of Tokyo about exactly what you've just said, which is how do you teach ATL skills at the PYP level. The full video you can find on YouTube, but I'll just show you a short clip out of this.
At Tokyo International School, we foster both the culture of thinking and also we teach thinking skills explicitly.
What kinds of questions do we get? Let me see.
Where's the setting?
Where kind of questions?
Who questions?
Who questions? Good. Every few pages, I'm going to stop and then I'll give you a chance to share your question. Are you ready?
Yeah.
Okay.
What we're learning is how does music make you feel? And how we are learning is by thinking and making connection. And then listen to this song right now, and I want you to think about how it makes you feel.
I would be able to say, explain my thinking to others. Give me a thumb if you also follow that strategy as well.
Don't forget to include some mathematical drawings that will show your thinking. You're going to need to reason and justify why you chose the tables that you chose.
So it seems to me at the PYP level, the skills emphasis is very, very metacognitive. What the teachers are trying to do is get children to start noticing their own thinking, to start getting them to notice, like they talked about there, the questions that they ask. What type of questions are they doing? What kind of thinking are they doing? And so to me, it is completely driven by the teacher. So this is what we're going to move to later on. I have a clip here of a middle school in Finland.
At the Hiidenkivi Comprehensive School in Helsinki, another day begins with Finnish language lessons. The kids are covering 3 topics over 3 hours, forming arguments and expressing ideas, working in a group, using shared documents to enhance learning.
From today, you should be able to turn news articles into something interesting that you can present to other people. And you can investigate what those articles are about and learn something new.
The pupils chose newspaper articles on archaeology, sport and refugees as their themes or phenomena. And now they're working on specific topics. The emphasis shifts from reproducing facts to using facts.
We're writing things about refugees. We've read a lot, but we also add some stuff.
Because I'm kind of running out of time. But basically what they're suggesting is that the focus in that lesson is on creating a good argument. And the children are allowed to choose whatever topic they want to do. So it's not subject-based, it is process-based, and it's very explicit. And I have another clip here from the United States, which is what I call design thinking.
So guys, let's answer this question together.
Maybe put some on more.
So you want to put some on the hips to brace the back?
Yeah.
All right, but what about bracing this piece?
Because we explicitly teach process skills through design thinking, our students are better collaborators, they are more resourceful, and they are critical thinkers and problem solvers.
So where a school has a design thinking program, that is essentially an ATL skills program. It's collaboration, it's communication, it's creative thinking, it's critical thinking. And if we look at the Cambridge assessment system, Cambridge now has a complete program called Thinking Skills. I actually have their textbook here on thinking skills. And they have an accessible program on thinking skills. I guess my point is that it is possible to teach all these skills explicitly, and I think it's a very, very good thing to do. But of course, once the child has gathered the skill explicitly, then they need to apply that skill within their lesson. So I had a whole lot of questions, but I'm just about out of time. So I think, just to sum up, I think teachers need to be able to teach some ATL skills explicitly within normal subject lessons or outside of subject lessons in their own remedial program, and teach some ATL skills implicitly by having students practice different skills in normal subject lessons and by designing subject lessons around ATL skill processes. So I have a suggestion that it is possible to create a program, or an explicit program of core skills. The most basic social, emotional, organizational, and study skills can be taught as a specific program, as long as those skills are then built into the subject lessons by every teacher. That will work well. So how do you implicitly teach ATL skills? Well, unit design, lesson design. I guess these are, maybe I need to come back to this later. But I think if you're designing units within an IB context, that you need to just focus on maybe 1 or 2 ATL skills per unit. And then when you're at the level of designing the lessons, a focus only on 1 ATL skill per lesson means it's not too complex for the students, and they can focus on 1 skill. Of course, they're using many, but you can implicitly focus on 1 skill per lesson. Obviously, designing activities, ATL skills are all about doing. Needs to use the skill to increase knowledge, understanding, or use of the subject matter, and focus on doing. That is an ATL skill in action. So that's, I have written several books, as you probably know, on ATL skills. And so these books are full of activities and exercises. These are all the exercises in those books. So you're welcome to have a look at those if you wish. But I have something new for you here. I'll jump past that because I want to show you this. This is something new. I'll come back to that slide, don't worry. This is called LALATAT, which stands for Learning About Learning and Thinking About Thinking. This is brand new. It was only released 4 days ago. And it's at lalatat.com. And this is what lalatat.com looks like. There's a video you can watch there. And we have set up a demonstration trial where you can access for free. You can go in, you can look at a demonstration trial of the portals of ATL skill exercises. So it's a unique program for learning the full curriculum of skills. There's going to be over 300 individual skill exercises for students in all the categories for the DP and the MYP. And they'll be available in English, French, Spanish, Chinese, Japanese, and Vietnamese, And Ali is talking about Arabic as well now. So that's another possibility. And there's a free trial available right now if you want to go online. If you can look at this table, the column on the right are all the categories of 21st century skills, or ATL skills, call them what you like, that we have in our ATL framework. And from the left moving across, you can see how they line up with MYP ATL and DP ATL. So if you go here and you click on the free demo trial, you have to put in your email address, but then you will get a link which will enable you to open up these portals. Now this is a portal for ATL skills for the DP. You can see it's got the 5 categories of skills for the DP there. And if you click on the category, it starts to open it up. So what we've done is we've, just for a demonstration, we've put in just 2 strands for each one of those 5 categories. So write scientific reports and papers, make effective summary notes. Eventually, when we release fully, which will be September the 1st, there will be 10 or 15 strands for each category at least. For the MYP, we of course have the 10 clusters of skills, and if you open those up, then you'll see there's 2 strands for each one of those. Now, if you click on one of those strands, it opens up further into the actual exercises under each strand. So let's look at this one, exercise leadership and take on a variety of roles within a group. You can see that there are 6 exercises in there. Each exercise is pretty much what was in this book, but it's in an interactive digital format, so students can actually write in the answers to the exercises. Here's an exercise on leadership attitude. All these boxes you see are all digital boxes that students can write in. They write in their answers, and the website saves their answers, so next time they open up, they've got their answers there still. Exercise on leading social action, similar kind of things, role modeling. Here's one I particularly like. These are great quotes. So you've got to work in pairs, either live or remotely. Look at each saying about leadership and describe what it means in your own words. Link up with another pair of students working on the same exercise and compare your results and see if you agree. Explore any differences in interpretation and see if you can come to an agreement on the meaning of things like great leaders eat last. That's from Stephen Sinek. Some are born great, some achieve greatness, and some have greatness thrust upon them, from William Shakespeare. And one of my favorites from Alexander the Great. I'm not afraid of an army of lions led by a sheep. I'm afraid of an army of sheep led by a lion. Just wonderful exercises for students to do to think about leadership. So LALATEC can be used by teachers as a set of skills to embed in any subject lesson. Can be used by students to learn the skills themselves for all the tasks that they need to do for teachers, for tests, for assignments, for exams. Can be used by any school as a full, once we have the entire platform open, which will be September, it'll be a full curriculum for a complete standalone ATL or 21st century skills program. Can be used by any parent for helping their children to learn the skills they need for success at school and in careers, and by any person for the thinking and learning skills they need for the future. So I encourage you to go to LALATEC for a free trial. You can get 1 month's free access to the demonstration portals. That's just 2 strands for each category. You just need to go to lalatec.com. And when you are there, I'll go back up here actually, where this is what the portals look like here. You can also, once you're in the portal, click on the free full school trial. You see that up on the left? And what that does, you can then register your school, and at September the 1st, you will get 1 month free trial of the entire portal, all 300 exercises for all of your IB students, all of your IB teachers, the whole, everyone in the school can have access to that for 1 month, no obligation. And if you like it, then you could sign up for the program if you like. We've made it very simple, and we've made it as simple as possible. And what else would you like to know? I suppose what it costs. It is, if the school does sign up, it is $1 per student per month. That's all.
Okay.
So that's pretty much it. There was one slide back here that I didn't get to. This is probably the last bit. What do teachers need? What are the real lessons from COVID? Teachers need comprehensive training in how to design good, engaging remote learning lessons. They need to be familiar with every website that teaches their subject matter, both the free and the paid sites. Schools need to invest in subscriptions for teachers in all the best school subject sites. And students need to master the skills, and they need to master those skills remotely. So thank you very much. It's on the dot of 7 o'clock. I'm happy to stay here and answer any questions that people have.
So yeah, let's take those next few minutes before the people leaves us, and I say a final thank you. Maybe I still have few questions to answer. Many people are asking about the links. All those links are going to be shared via email, the following email that you usually receive tomorrow. The session is recording, so if you felt that Lance was talking very fast today, he had a lot of things for you and he wanted to share all those. People who ask for examples and samples, I think with LalaTat now you can have all those samples, try them for free for a full month. People who are asking for more primary and early years, let me say that we are preparing a workshop for primary for next year via 4th generation. We have a great collaboration with Lance, and he will be again in the region. So we will update you once we have a new date confirmed and once we know that flying and traveling is again safe. What else do I need to do? Yeah, so Lance, some of the participants asked if we can have some of the slides where you shared all the curriculum designs of all those countries. You went through those very fast, and some people wanted to see those maybe in more details. And if we can have also the links of the videos, if they are available for everyone on YouTube, and maybe the links of your books. So thanks again for this session. For all the people who are still attending, we still have today a final session this afternoon. We will be talking about how to make the learning visible online with plenty of, again, resources, a very hands-on session. We will have participants working with us online. See you in the afternoon. Lance, we stay in touch. Thanks again for your time for this morning session. And what time? So it will be 4 p.m. Dubai time. Check our Facebook page for details, and we'll be also live on the Facebook page. Have a good day, good Friday, and wait for the updates. So we have a lot of updates via 4th generation. Stay connected, check our Facebook page, 4 Generations for Education. Lance, have a nice night. It's 7 p.m. in New Zealand. And thanks everyone again for being with us today for this session.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. I'm going to close this webinar.